Origin and Evolution of Life, and Introduction to Classification.
Here's a story of life on Earth. The age of Earth, the only planet which sustains life, is 4.5 billion years. For approximately 1 billion years, it lay barren, without any life. It was hot as hell, and with an atmosphere full of gases like NH3, CO2, CH4, H2, and water vapor. Earth then began to cool. Water vapor can be used. Metrical rains flooded the earth to form the oceans, into which were washed in gases, forming chemical compounds that frame the raw material for formation of life-giving molecules or biomolecules. Life arose, and the first cellular organisms, the bacteria, evolved. Then there was no looking back. In these 3.5 billion years, almost 15 million different organisms have evolved. This variety living can be expressed in one word: biodiversity. The origin of biomolecules marked an era of chemical evolution, while the formation of organizations is termed biological evolution. But where did the energy for formation of biomolecules come from? From UV rays, lightning, electrical discharges, and heat, of course. But in science, no hypothesis or theory can be accepted without experimental evidence. So Miller and Urey set up an experiment. Lo and behold, the expected chemical compounds were found as products of reaction occurring in the setup. So the chemosynthetic theory of A.I. Operin and J.B.S. Haldane got experimentally proven. Charles Darwin, father of the concept of evolution, had predicted chemical evolution a long time ago and called the seat of formation of complex chemical molecules the primordial soup, meaning the primitive soup. His theory of organic evolution through natural selection is tenable. In fact, his contribution is merited with two concepts. All organisms are related through ancestry, and suggested the mechanism of natural selection as responsible for biological evolution. Once the idea of appearance of various kinds of organisms due to evolution or organic evolution or biological evolution was accepted, people began to look for evidence and found evidence for evolution from morphology, anatomy, embryology, and fossils. Concerning links between groups of animals were discovered through fossil studies. Homology and analogy was among various groups of organisms. Molecular homology and biochemical homology added more evidence in the latter half of the 20th century. Common amongst all: DNA, genetic code, protein synthesis, amino acids, enzyme-driven reactions, RNA. And how has this vast biodiversity, which inhabited the only green planet of our solar system, come into existence? The unit which undergoes evolution is the population, that is, small part of a species living in a limited geographical area. In this population, variation takes place. Variation simply means a variety of genes different from each other. One of the sources of variation is mutation, or a sudden genetic change. By far, the most common cause of genetic recombination, which take place when gametes form and fuse during sexual reproduction. Natural selection then acts on variation and brings about greater reproduction of those variant gene, which helps to adapt to the prevailing environment. After some time, This population with new genes and gene combination may even become unable to inbreed with its ancestral population. It has then become a new species, apart from the ancestral species. In nature, the action of natural selection through its interaction with variation is very well observable in nature. 3 such examples are cited here. Examples of natural selection in action become conspicuous when the environment changes. Industrial melanism. Before the Industrial Revolution in British Isles, the peppered moth, Biston betullaria, was light in color and birds could not see them and eat them up when they were sitting on lichen-covered walls. Industrial soot-covered walls, and after the Industrial Revolution, the black mutants were selected as lighter ones were eaten up by birds. Soon, black Biston betullaria carbonaria replaced the BB betullaria variety. Metal tolerance. Certain grasses growing near industries using metals evolved into the metal-tolerant variety through action of natural selection on mutation. Can you explain how? DDT-resistant mosquitoes. To eradicate malaria, the Anopheles larvae were killed by DDT. As in the graph above, soon the mosquitoes developed DDT resistance, starting as mutants, and the population of such mosquitoes again through the action of natural selection have appeared. Apart from variation and natural selection, isolation is another elemental force which has a role to play in the evolution of new species. While geographical isolation has a role in the formation of new species, reproductive isolation inhibits different species from breeding with each other. As a result, species remain distinct. Evolution of new species through the action of natural selection on variation and then reproductive isolation between the new and the parental species is termed speciation. Speciation may be: allopatric speciation occurs when 2 geographically isolated species do not breed for a long time and ultimately preserve different mutations and become reproductively isolated. Sympatric speciation is when from a parental species a new population arises and evolves reproductive barriers and becomes a new species. Polyploidy is a quick means of evolution wherein mutation causes chromosomes to become doubled or tripled, and they are unable to interpret. Darwin believed that evolution proceeds slowly to give rise to a new species. This model of speciation is called phyletic graduation. Eldridge and Stephen Jay Gould, on the other hand, gave the model of punctuated equilibrium, and in which a new species arises through major changes, remains constant for a long time, and then changes again to give an other species. That is why there are big gaps in fossil records between ancestral and descendant species. Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. This is a concept related to both genetics and evolution and was proposed by G. H. Hardy and W. Weinberg. A population of sexually reproducing organisms in which genes combine at random due to random mating is called panmictic. In other words, a panmictic population is one in which mating partners are not specifically selected. For example, we humans usually do not look for specific blood group when a marriage is arranged. So, we are panmictic with respect to blood types. The Hardy-Weinberg principle states that in a panmictic population, if there is no pressure of mutation, selection, genetic drift, etc., then the relative frequency of any pair of genes remains constant, generation after generation. For example, a gene has 2 alleles, P and Q, in the population, and no mutation or selection, etc., takes place, then the frequency of these 2 alleles will remain constant generation after generation. This can be mathematically represented as p plus q whole square is equal to 1, or p square plus 2pq plus q square is equal to 1. Almost 15 million species have inhabited the earth, say biologists, of which only 2 million have been identified and given scientific names. Such vast biodiversity can be studied only if it is classified. Classification is the method of grouping organisms according to their similarity and differences. Science of classification is taxonomy. In modern times, taxonomy is called systematics, which also considers evolutionary relationship between groups. Taxonomy categories. Every organism can be classified into several taxonomic categories. Each category or level is a taxon. These categories or levels are hierarchically placed according to closeness of evolutionary relationships. The diagram shows how human species may be classified into the various taxonomic categories: kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. Every species is given biological or scientific name recognized all over the world. A scientific name has two words or binomen, name of the genus and name of the species.